Today's episode is about staying ready so you don't got to get ready. We are going through our favorite values on Underdog Fantasy right now and discussing the strategies we are using to potentially win Best Ball Mania 5, take home $1.5 million, which is the top prize. Welcome in this week's episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. I should say this week. We're up to 2 episodes a week. Lucas Wencl, Tyler Plath, both with you. Tyler, this is a super fun episode because we get to talk a little bit of kind of game theory, game strategy, but also do some quick takes on some players as well. Which part of the episode are you most excited for?
I always like talking about the players. I feel like that's what everyone really comes for, and they look for the steals. They look for who to not target because they're going way too high, all those kind of things. So I am very much excited to talk about our 6 players that we find to be good values in basketball drafts this year.
So we will talk about our favorite values. We will go through what actually is an Underdog Fantasy League. We recognize a lot of listeners to our podcast, a lot of viewers on our YouTube channel are just now getting familiar with Underdog Fantasy. So we want to make sure we help onboard you in an accessible way. And as Tyler said, we'll be talking about values and some of the strategies we are using in these drafts that you can implement as well as you begin to try them out. So Tyler, let's first start with a little bit of best ball strategy. So what differs in Underdog Fantasy drafts from your normal redraft leagues and why in the world people are drafting them this early is that in a best ball league, you draft a team of 18 players and the highest scoring player of each week goes into your lineup automatically. So you don't have to worry about making the wrong start or sit decision because it's automatically made for you by Underdog every single week. And the goal is it's truly who can draft the best team. That is truly what this is a competition of. So in a large pool, in a large contest like Best Ball Mania 5 over on Underdog Fantasy, where there are literally thousands upon thousands upon thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of entries into these contests, you need to have a little bit of strategy, a little bit of theory as to how you can gain an edge on the rest of the competition. Now, there are a lot of things you may hear. There's a lot of other channels that dedicate their time specifically to this. Ship chasing is one that I immediately think of. Establish the Run does a lot of best ball work as well. Pete Overzet on his own channel, he does a lot of great work. Legendary Upside with Pat Corain. There's a lot of great resources out there. So Ty and I are like taking a snapshot of a much larger way to play fantasy football for you all. We're hoping this is a bite-sized on-ramp for you. So enough of my rambling though, Ty. Let's talk some strategy. Some of the things that you and I, as we are now, I'm like 25, 30 drafts into Best Ball Summer already. I think you are further along than me. You're probably 40, 50 deep.
Yeah, maybe a little more than that, actually, to be honest.
No shame.
It's the slow. They get me.
The slow drafts are super easy to enter because, again, you don't have to be on the clock all the time, but you can do a slow draft and you'll be on the clock eventually. All that to say, Ty, there's a lot of different strategies. People hear week 17 stacking, week 16 stacking. You got to get to week 17. Just let the board come to you, but you also got to value player takes. What is the one strategy that you feel like you are implementing in the majority of your drafts this year?
It's the hero RB strategy. And I think it is I would say it's a pretty commonly used strategy in your redraft leagues as well. But when it comes to best ball and you look at it specifically in Best Ball Mania 5, and you look at the structure of your starting lineups on a week-to-week basis, you get 1 quarterback, you get 2 running backs, it's 3 wide receivers, a tight end, and a flex. So because of the additional wide receiver piece in your lineup, you need to have, variance is a good way to put it. You need to have good depth of wide receivers in these contests to go a long way, right? And then you can add on top of it in terms of the correlation and the stacking and all those kind of things. But right off the gate for me, I think if you were to get into a Best Ball Mania 5 draft, you see I don't know what it is. It's maybe 30 wide receivers within like the first 45 picks, maybe 50 picks. It's because everyone puts a premium on this wide receiver position because you need so many of them, and it makes sense. But we can't, at least I believe, you can't neglect and you can't push back the running back position, because then we're banking on our dead zone running backs. We're banking on these late round flyers that aren't necessarily the most guaranteed to come through throughout the season, right? Like we saw Kyron Williams, who I don't exactly remember off the top of my head where he was going in drafts, but I want to say like he was pretty much going undrafted. He was like an 18th round flyer for some people, right? And sure enough, like he turned out to be the running back 2 in points per game. So that was a massive payout. Raheem Mostert was another one. Like there is some luck involved when it comes to nailing the later round running backs. I don't want to do that without any kind of lead hero running back in front of them, because I do need some kind of production in front of them, right? So hero RB, typically in these drafts, you are targeting a running back in the first 2 rounds of your drafts. And this year it's kind of a pretty ideal, season to do a hero RB strategy, because you've got CMC, who's more than likely the 101 in 9 out of 10 drafts. Then you're looking at Breece, Bijan, and Jahmyr Gibbs, who go anywhere between like the middle to the end of the first round. And then you got Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley, who are kind of early to mid second round picks. If you can get any one of those 6 guys, you can push back and you can punt your running backs until later rounds, because you are getting a top contributor at the position early on. You don't need to go double running back. You don't need to go 3 running backs. I know there are a lot of people that say like, well, you should go heavy running back. It's not me, but I also kind of I can see why people do it, because it's going against the grain. It's zigging when everyone else is zagging, right? So that's personally what I would try to do. I try to layer it on top with getting an elite quarterback, one of these top 4, 5, 6 guys with some elite rushing upside. Your Josh Allen's, your Jalen Hurts's, your Lamar Jackson, and your Anthony Richardsons of the world. And then with those 2 picks, and probably then for the next 5, 6 picks after, you're just loading up on pass catchers, wide receivers. Heck, even if a tight end kind of slips down the board a little bit, may make sense for who you take earlier in the draft. So essentially, getting a stud running back, a stud quarterback is typically how I go into these drafts. Sometimes I'm not able to, just because of where I am positioned in drafts, but that is the strategy that I want to implement the most, because I'm getting value pretty much. I don't want to say with every pick then, but I'm getting the most value with my certain draft picks, middle and early first round, even if that's where I'm choosing.
So the other thing to look at as well is, where are the rest of the running backs falling on the board as well? Because if you do go, let's say, a Breece Hall, a Bijan Robinson in the first round, or you get a Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley in the second round, running backs 20 through 30, so 10 running backs, go within 20 picks of each other. So when we're saying there's 30 wide receivers off the board in the first 50 picks, running backs 20 through 30, go within 20 picks then. Once you get to pick 82, which would be just shy of the 7th round, basically all the way through the 9th round then. So you have to then play the game of, I can load up on wide receivers then after I get this running back. I can take my elite quarterback after I get this running back, because quite literally, I can get a Zamir White, a Najee Harris, a DeAndre Swift, a Jalen Warren kind of player later on as my running back 2, and load up on other guys, because with 3 flex players, it's a much higher chance these wide receivers are going to outscore these running backs. You're probably going to be starting more wide receivers than you are running backs. So again, zigging where everybody's zagging in terms of going heavy running back early, I feel like that might be a little bit more of a letting the board come to you strategy, right? Where it's like, if Breece Hall is going to slide 3 spots past ADP, if Jahmyr Gibbs, instead of being taken at the 1-2 turn, instead goes in the middle of the second round, I'm not going to pass on Jahmyr Gibbs in the middle of the second round. Why would I do that? So of course I'm going to take Jahmyr Gibbs there. Maybe I did take a Bijan Robinson in the first round then, right? Maybe I do start off 2 elite running backs. You do have to let the board come to you, but I would agree, it is optimal to make sure you get at least one running back, within the first 4 rounds. I don't think you can really wait and punt too much longer than that if you want to keep an optimal edge against the other people who you'll be um, competing against on a week-to-week basis in your league. I think letting the board come to you kind of plays into my strategy a little bit, because on the one hand, I've been really trying to practice letting the board come to me this year. Picking up on week 17, week 16 stacking, once you know the matchups, it's not really hard to do. But the temptation is once you draft certain players, is that you have to go down and reach for other players to get your stack. So you're drafting around stacking instead of what the lobby is giving you. And I think that's really developed how I view week 17 stacking this year. Because week 17 is when all the marbles are on the line, right? So that's why we value week 17 stacking, is we try and stack good games, because if good games go off, you score more points, which means you have a higher chance of winning the prize pool, right? That's the basic logic behind week 17 stacking. But really, what has been most transformational for my best ball drafting this year is kind of this wide receiver strategy that Hayden had come out with. I realized I didn't put your strategy up on the screen. That my apologies for that. Your hero running back quarterback strategy. I know, as I'm like coming through, like tracking your wide receiver total by round. Hayden Winks of Underdog Fantasy, he did this research on what has been an optimal strategy in each of the first Best Ball Mania 4 contests. And he did it all based around wide receivers, because wide receivers is this polarizing topic right now of they keep getting pushed up the board. And why? For what reason? Guys like Alvin Kamara are going in the sixth round right now, which is insane to me. But the optimal strategy is to have at least 4 to 5 wide receivers through round 7, according to Hayden, 5 to 6 wide receivers on your roster through round 10. But then by the end of the draft, which is 18 rounds, you only have 7 to 8 wide receivers. So you are drafting a bulk of your wide receivers in the first 10 rounds of the draft. And then you are taking more shots on those tight ends, on a quarterback too, on more depth in your running back room. Again, you look at some of these I'll even go ahead and look at like round 10 or round 11 running backs, right? Like you still get Ezekiel Elliott in that range who could be a starter, or Zach Charbonnet, where if anything happens to Ken Walker, you got Marshawn Lloyd in there who's getting a lot of buzz this offseason. Like, it's optimal to draft wide receivers early and often, because the later you get in drafts, it's easier to throw darts on running backs than it is on wide receivers. And that has what has been most transformational for my drafting is tracking how many wide receivers I'm taking by round, because again, you need to have wide receivers. The longer you wait on them, the quicker you lose out. So if I don't have I've even gone to the extent of if I don't have 3 wide receivers through 5 rounds, I may as well chalk this one up, because I don't feel that great about this draft. So that has been most transformational and impactful in my drafting. Have you implemented that at all? What has that been like for you, if you have, or have you kind of been ignoring that one a little bit?
No, there is something to be said about just letting the board coming to you, but then also understanding wide receivers matter more in this contest. And it's kind of I don't know if oxymoron is the right way to say it, because you're playing half PPR. So you're like, the volume guys aren't necessarily like as valuable, but they get pushed up anyways because you need wide receivers, right? But the fact is, again, you're starting 3 wide receivers and you have a flex. The chances are of you starting 4 or I should say, having 4 wide receivers play in your lineup on a week-to-week basis, having 4 wide receivers versus 3 wide receivers and 3 running backs, or actually that's the only other way that it can be, other than like a tight end at the flex. But like getting 4 to 5 good wide receivers through round 7, I would even push like through round 8 even, is crucial. You need it. It has to happen. And like you said, that feeling that you get if you don't get 3 wide receivers by the end of round 5, and you're looking at you've got like a stud tight end though, but you've got a running back, a quarterback, and a wide receiver, you're kind of like, meh, like it's okay, but it's not, you're not going to feel great at the end of it, because you're going to look at other teams in your draft and you're going to see, 4 or 5 really solid and really good values. because maybe you decided to load up on other positions, or they just went out and got their guys, which that's fantasy football. Some people will just go get their guys. You don't want a crazy reach, but I also get it from a certain standpoint. So I tend to follow that a little bit too, right? With hero running backs and the elite quarterbacks, you need to kind of choose your spots carefully, because you can't just go out of your way. You can't just recklessly pick them, because you also have to remember that there's more than just those two spots and those two players that you're going to choose to your lineups.
You're not going to be able to draft, CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Waddle, Derrick Henry, Patrick Mahomes, and Travis Kelce and be like, wow, I've got such a loaded team right off the bat. Like, you're just not going to be able to do that. I'm sorry. Because too many of those guys all go within the same range of each other. You're not going to be able to find as many good wide receiver values, as many good running back values, quarterback, tight end values, all within the same range. Like, people are paying to play in these leagues. Best Ball Mania is $25, but you and I have entered plenty of puppy drafts, which are only $5. And there are plenty of people flooding those drafts that are getting an edge competitively because they are drafting this early. They care. That's part of it. They care. They're not just in there to give player takes. They're trying to win these prize pools as well. So I do think it is one of the best ways in which you can draft early. You can get an early sense of ADP. This best ball ADP is going to be different than your redraft ADP. I'm not trying to say they're interchangeable by any means, but if you want a way where it's like, you know what, $5 and I could potentially win 300K. Absolutely. This is one of the best ways you can implement some of these strategies and join some of these drafts with us. And if you sign up for Underdog 2 with the code FELLAS, they will give you a special deposit bonus of up to $250. And you will get a copy of our draft guide for absolutely free as well. So you don't have to pay the $10. All you got to do is make that first time deposit and join one of their contests. So again, code FELLAS over there. You can try using these strategies in those drafts, and we will be going live with more Underdog drafts as well all throughout the summer. At least twice a week, I think we're planning on at this point. So again, code FELLAS, you can come draft with us. We go live twice a week and go ahead and try and enter any of those contests to win a share of those prize pools. Ty, let's take a quick break here, a little bit early, but we will be back with our favorite values then in Underdog's best ball contests. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100. Alrighty, we are back. You timed that perfectly. Well done.
Thank you. I've got a feel for it now. We've done this a couple 100 times probably. I've got a feel for it.
We're gonna go ahead and give you some of our favorite values over on Underdog right now. We've got both, not only where they're being drafted positionally, but where they are being drafted in total ADP as well. Because again, this matters in Underdog, where like you're going to see in one of our, probably actually our first 2 players, you're going to be like, how in the world are these 2 players going this late in drafts? Well, it's because wide receivers are getting pushed up. They're more of a necessity in these drafts. So we include overall ADP as well, because it does matter when you're trying to strategize in these drafts. So Ty, I will let you start. Who is your first favorite value in these Underdog contests right now?
It's the guy that I'm probably, based on our draft guide, which, hey, it's available now, by the way. You should definitely check it out.
Absolutely.
It's a work of art, and I mean that in the most sincere way. This guy, though, I've got pretty high on my rankings, and he's at least ranked ahead of consensus at this point, just based on my rankings. But I just literally cannot stop drafting him when the situation is right. It's Isiah Pacheco. Okay. And I am going to no longer victory lap this around the fellas because I was the one that did bring up Isiah Pacheco last year that said, like, guys, are we a little like too out on Isiah Pacheco? And you guys were like,
no.
well, it's Patrick Mahomes, like he's gonna do everything. It's okay, fine. And I listen. Hey, because again, the argument was there. But it wasn't even that like last year was like that spectacular for Isiah Pacheco though either. But the reason why like I'm super optimistic and in on Isiah Pacheco this year is just because of where he goes in these best ball drafts. But the finish that he had to last season was alarming in the best way possible. Okay. So right now, currently in underdog drafts, he currently goes at pick 46, which is the late 4th round. That's the running back 12 this year. So just think about that for a second. A top 12 running back based on the rankings is going in the late 4th round. That's best ball in a nutshell real quick. But Pacheco's, it really is. The amount of times, let me tell you, the amount of times that I get to like the 7th round and I'm looking at that like running back 21 to 29 with like 3 tight ends mixed in and like 2 quarterbacks because everyone's just like going crazy for wide receivers. It's unbelievable. But anyway, back to Pacheco. From week 16 through the Super Bowl, Isiah Pacheco was the running back 5 in expected fantasy points per game. And that's expected fantasy points are really fantasy points calculated based on how the player was utilized in the offense. And again, when I say per game, that's why let me start that over. I use per game when talking about week 16 through the Super Bowl, because again, not every team makes the Super Bowl, right? And when you're getting closer and closer to the Super Bowl, more teams are being eliminated, right? So by the time you get to the Super Bowl, we're only talking about the Niners and the Chiefs. But on a per game basis, he was the running back 5 based on how he was being utilized in this Kansas City offense. And the other, I'll say this, the other part of why I'm so in on Pacheco is because he was getting more receiving work towards the end of the year. That's not really being talked about right now. From weeks 12 to the Super Bowl, where he missed 3 games. What was it? Week 13, 14, and like 18 because they rested their guys in week 18.
Yep.
He had 33 targets and 32 catches. That's nearly 4 per game. 4 targets and 4 receptions per game. From weeks 1 to 11, he had 29 targets and 27 receptions. That's 2 and some change per game on an average. So he's getting more receiving work towards the end of last year. He was top 12 in breakaway run rate. So he's a big play waiting to happen in this Kansas City offense. And again, the concern last year was touchdown upside because you've got Patrick Mahomes and you've got Travis Kelce. So how like you can get the ball downfield, but he could be another DeAndre Swift where he gets a ton of usage, but he's not really going to score because they've got other people and they've got other players that can do that job. He had 9 total touchdowns last year, which was 12th of all running backs. He was 7th in red zone touches. I know I just talked about the hero running back strategy. If I miss out on any of those top 6 guys, I'm immediately targeting Isiah Pacheco because of where he goes in these drafts. It's easily attainable in that 4th round, late 4th round range. So I find myself taking Isiah Pacheco a ton right now. I'm going to actually look this up on the fly. I'm pretty sure Isiah Pacheco, I'll plug this real quick. On Underdog Fantasy, you can see how much you've been drafting of certain players in these drafts.
Yes.
It's a huge tool and it keeps you kind of on pace and on track for like, okay, I probably need to take a little bit more of this guy, stay off of this guy a little bit because I've been drafting him so much. Isiah Pacheco right now is my 3rd highest drafted player. I can't stop drafting him. It doesn't matter. Again, if I miss out on any of the top 6 guys, I'm always looking at Pacheco.
So what I like about Pacheco is what you brought up, the fact that he was getting involved in the receiving game towards the end of the season. I think that is such a huge, huge factor for his game. He doesn't need to be, a Rashad White 73 target guy, a we'll say Breece Hall 80 target, Bijan 80 target guy. Like Pacheco can be a 51 target kind of guy, which is what I have him projected for this year, and make a difference in the receiving game. That is such a necessary boost to his fantasy value. And he's the only guy there. You got CEH. He isn't a threat. Jerick McKinnon isn't with the team anymore. So could Clyde catch passes? Sure. But, if what the end of the season indicated is true, that they're going to get Pacheco involved in the passing game more, I am all in on that for the 2024 season. Again, if he keeps that pace up for the 2024 season, we are looking at a 70 target running back. Now, I don't think he averages 4 targets per game. I have him right around 3 targets per game, but at any rate, it's a much necessary boost to Isiah Pacheco's value. And I'm with you. I love him as a running back 12 right now. I will gladly go 3 straight wide receivers to start my draft and then take Pacheco as my RB1. I'm very, very happy with that. And I'm very content with that majority of the time. So yeah, I'm with you. Big fan of Isiah Pacheco in drafts right now. I'm going to go with a running back as well. I've talked about this running back enough on this show already recently, so I'm going to try and keep it short here. It's Alvin Kamara. Look, I'm not afraid of Kendre Miller. I quite frankly don't understand why people are. His rookie season was riddled with injuries, and the only time he got more than 3 carries in a game was in week 3 when Kamara was suspended still, and in week 5 when the Saints blew the absolute doors off the Patriots 34-0. Of course, Kendre was going to get some run in that game. Kamara's still drawn at least 5.5 targets per game over the last 3 years. Well, okay, let me go back to Kendre for a second, because I don't want to just write Kendre off as a non-factor. Could Kendre get 7, 8, 9 touches per game this year? Sure, he can have them, because Alvin Kamara has never needed to be a 17+ rush attempt guy to be fantasy relevant, nor has he needed to be efficient with his rushing attempts as well, because Kamara has drawn, as I said, 5.5 targets per game over the last 3 years, where he's missed at least 4 games each year. Yet during that span, he's finished no lower as the running back 14 in fantasy points per game. So this is the conversation we were having about Rachaad White last year, right? A guy who apparently has a threat in the backfield in Sean Tucker, who is a non-factor, who is horribly inefficient with his rushing attempts, but he's going to draw a crap ton of targets and put the team on his back in that category. And those targets are worth 2.5 to 3 times more fantasy points than rushing attempts are anyways. So I don't get it. I don't get the running back 17 price tag on Kamara. If you really think Kendre Miller is that big of a threat, fine. I don't. So when I'm getting Kamara, again, late 5th, early 6th round in most of these drafts, it is the easiest pick. He's my highest exposure player right now. I've drafted him in about just under a third of my drafts. That's how much I love Alvin Kamara at this value.
Last year, he was going as a running back 37 on Underdog, and that was because he was going to be suspended for 3 games. And guess what he did then the rest of the year? Just be the running back 5 in points per game. Like
it's like we don't care. We don't care that he was on pace. He saw 86 targets in what, 13 games? It's like we don't care. It just baffles me. It baffles me. 86 targets in 13 games last year. That just baffles me. Yeah. When targets are worth 2.5 to 3 times more than rushing attempts are, and we get these running backs who are seeing such massive amounts of targets, to me, they're locks to finish top 15, if not top 12. So Alvin Kamara, screaming value to me. He is one of the easiest picks over on Underdog right now. Let's transition off of running backs, Ty. Let's move to your second best value, which again is not a running back. I'm actually surprised you chose this player. I'm going to be honest.
So let me start with this. I haven't been able to get much of him because I frankly get sniped on him every single time. But it's Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Okay, right now in drafts, I didn't write. Oh, you have it right there for me. Thank you.
Of course,
thank you. So right now in basketball drafts, he goes as the wide receiver 44 at pick 77. mental math, not my strong suit today. That is 7th.
Be 7th
A
round.
little before. Yeah, 7th round. So
Mid 7th round.
yeah. If you can grab Jaxon Smith-Njigba as your wide receiver 5, and I would even be okay with him being your wide receiver 4, but if you can get him as your wide receiver 5, oh, you are sitting real pretty. Okay. Ryan Grubb is the new offensive coordinator. We've talked about this plenty. We talked about it with DK a little bit and all that stuff. His hire means a more pass-friendly offense in Seattle. Even though JSN did not have a huge season last year where he missed some games because he was coming off of a wrist surgery and all those kind of things, it's not the end of the world. And if anything, I would argue you should be more in on him this year than you were last year. This is a classic right player in the wrong scheme and situation last year, and he's getting penalized for it by going as a wide receiver 44 this year. According to reception perception done by Matt Harmon, again, we've plugged him plenty of times, but it is so insightful what he does with wide receiver data and stuff like that. JSN was 60th percentile or better against all coverages, man, zone, press coverage, you name it, 60th percentile or better. That is solid at the worst. He was better. I mean, like 60th percentile, I believe was his score, I guess, against press coverage. He was in like the 70s against man and zone. Like, again, solid at worst. So it wasn't exactly his fault. He was getting open, and you look at his success percentage based on the routes that he ran and stuff. He was winning. He was winning his routes. It wasn't his fault that he wasn't putting up big numbers in year 1. And again, in year 2 for him, his sophomore year, with Ryan Grubb calling the plays in a much more pass-friendly offense, he should be able to take a step forward. And if anything, if he takes a step forward, he's going to return more than what you paid for at this wide receiver 44 price tag. Essentially, a bet on JSN is a bet on him progressing and developing. And I think he's going to do that in tenfold in this offense because it's going to be more friendly towards him. He's not going to be, and I'll say this too, in that Shane Waldron offense, he was stuck to this weird kind of screen and short game kind of role. I'm expecting him to be used a little more downfield this year, and that could definitely return some dividends this year.
I'm always willing to take a bet on an insanely high caliber, highly touted prospect, year 2 wide receiver with the 44th wide receiver selection, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, we're talking middle of the 7th round. Zay Flowers, again, we're looking at guys who are going earlier than him, second-year wide receiver. Jordan Addison is going as the wide receiver 38 ahead of him. Zay Flowers going as the wide receiver 25 ahead of him. Who's the other one that I'm obviously missing?
I'm looking it up because there is one.
Quentin Johnson was the other one that I was thinking of, and obviously he's not going anywhere. He's going way later.
Jaden Reed.
But Jaden Reed, thank you. Going as the wide receiver 34 ahead of Jaxon Smith-Njigba. I'm not saying all those guys should be going after JSN, but if this is the guy who was touted to be the best wide receiver prospect in his class, was taken as the number 1 wide receiver in this class by the Seattle Seahawks, is now getting necessary upgrades in what is a phenomenally designed Washington Huskies offense last year by Ryan Grubb. Geno Smith, who is actually a fairly accurate downfield passer, he can push the ball down the field. That means nothing but good things for JSN for me. And if he gets out of that Shane Waldron prison that he was in, again, that's a gamble I will take 10 times out of 10 at the wide receiver 44. The only player I mix in a little bit there too is Deontay Johnson. It's dependent on how I'm building out my wide receivers at that point. But JSN is a very, very easy pick for me in the middle of the 7th round there. No questions asked.
I will say this too. The tough part with JSN when it comes to your drafts is that he's going in this range where people are going to get ahead of themselves and draft him because the players that go right after him, Deontay Johnson, Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, Christian Watson, then it's a run on running backs. It's Ramondre, Zamir White, Rashee Rice, Najee Harris, DeAndre Swift, Jake Ferguson, Jameson Williams, Jonathan Brooks, and Jalen Warren. Some of those players are, okay values, and they will produce some weeks for your team. But people see what's coming behind him and they go, I got to get my wide receiver now before it's too late. And so they'll reach on JSN. And I'm not going to sit here and say that like reaching on JSN is a bad thing, but if we're reaching like 10 plus picks for JSN, then I will say it's a little bit of a bad pick. But he's a great value in my eyes at this wide receiver 44 tag. I haven't been able to get much of him just because of where I'm drafting and stuff like that. But I just love where he's going in drafts, and I think he can definitely better this when it comes towards the end of next season or this season.
The similar boat to you are with JSN, my next best value is someone that I am going to maybe not intentionally target so many shares of. I was pretty hot and heavy on this player early. I've cooled off a little bit, but now looking at my exposures, I think I can afford to start drafting him more often. It's Kyler Murray. I mean, this is a no-brainer. Look, the guy hasn't finished lower than the quarterback 9 in fantasy points per game since 2020. And has averaged no lower than 18.9 fantasy points in those seasons. So cool. Go ahead. I'll take the mobile quarterback with an offense that was running 68 plays per game with him at the helm last year, and just acquired the best alpha wide receiver prospect we've seen since Jamar Chase as the quarterback 8. Like, don't mind if I do. I'll happily take that there. Like, we're talking about Anthony Richardson and Jaden Daniels being these game-breaking quarterbacks, and I'm not going to be surprised if by the end of the year we look back saying, man, we should have seen this coming from Kyler, that he actually was the one that was coming through and breaking fantasy football this year and finishing as a top 5 option. So to get him as a quarterback 8, again, middle of the 7th round, going in the same range as JSN, I love scooping up Kyler Murray there, because if you're looking at any guy outside of the top 5 that has almost a guaranteed chance of finishing top 5 this year, if you were to place your bet on one guy, I think it would be Kyler Murray for me.
No, I also don't have much of Kyler because I'm either taking a quarterback high or I'm finding myself needing a wide receiver or a running back. I'm just like, you know what? There are guys like Jordan Love that'll come up, in the next round and a half or so. There's the Caleb Williams, there's the Jaden Daniels, right? But if you wait on a quarterback, right, you don't take any of the top 6 guys, Kyler Murray is then like a prime target because he's giving you the rushing upside that you want in your quarterbacks when it comes to these best ball drafts, with an alpha wide receiver like Marvin Harrison Jr. year 2 in this Arizona offense with Drew Petzing. Like, I completely agree with Kyler Murray this year at this quarterback 8 spot. It's borderline crazy to me that he's going this late.
I have him ahead of Joe Burrow. I have him ahead of CJ Stroud in my rankings. I have him ahead of, ready for this one, Patrick Mahomes in my rankings. These pocket passing quarterbacks, they just don't possess the same rushing upside that Kyler has. And I don't think we quite understand. Like, Kyler is, in my opinion, is locked into at least 80 plus rushing attempts this year. I mean, in 8 games last year, he had 44. The year prior, he had 88 in 11. In his fully healthy season, when he was I believe he was a quarterback 1 or quarterback 2 in fantasy football, he was up at like 133 attempts. I mean, this is a guy who does move out of the pocket, that does scoot. Like, this isn't just all right, yep, Justin Herbert will muster up 70 rush attempts this year and it'll be, for like 250 yards. No, like, Kyler can scoot, man. He has the game-breaking ability to run the football. It's just not going to be his only trait that he offers this team. And frankly, he has better weapons to work with than both Anthony Richardson and Jaden Daniels do. So I'm blown away we can get Kyler as the quarterback 8 when I think he has top 5 written all over him this year. Let's wrap it up, Ty. We each have one more value to talk about. You're actually going to talk about a quarterback that's going outside of the top 15 quarterbacks right now. Explain this one to me. I'm looking forward to this one.
It's a guy that we've talked plenty about as well already in different episodes. It's Jared Goff. In a similar vein to Isiah Pacheco, right? I had talked about going hero running back. I talked about getting an elite quarterback. If I can't get any of those guys and I miss out on the Kyler Murrays of the world, I'm just punting until the later rounds and specifically targeting Jared Goff, right? Quarterback 16, early 10th round, right at pick 124. That's early 10th round. Jared Goff again is another one of these pocket passers.
Packet passer.
The packet passers. So he doesn't necessarily give you the same kind of upside that again, Kyler Murray, Anthony Richardson, or Lamar, Jalen Hurts, all those quarterbacks, right? He doesn't give you that kind of upside. But what he does give you is some game. I don't want to call it game-changing weeks, but he gives you some really high upside weeks sometimes with the right matchup and in this offense in Detroit, right? He was top 5 in pass attempts last year. He was top 5 in passing yards. He was top 5 in passing touchdowns, right? And that's what matters when it comes down to these pocket passers. Can you put up yards and touchdowns? And Jared Goff did last year. We all know that he's a home game merchant, okay? That it is like, if you need an example, an exhibit A, it's Jared Goff, right? Last year, he averaged 21.3 fantasy points per game at home, okay? That's really good. That's really good for a pocket passer. But he averaged just 14.7 in away games. Like, not good. That's not startable, right? You take all of his games that he played indoors, though, and this is where the intrigue for Jared Goff is. His games that he played indoors, he averaged 19.6 fantasy points per game. That was the quarterback 6, or that would have been the quarterback 6 on the year. This year, he gets 14 of them suckers in his 17-game schedule. I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm expecting 19 fantasy points week in, week out. But the fact is that with Jared Goff in this Detroit offense, with Amon-Ra St. Brown, with Jahmyr Gibbs looking to get more involved in the passing game, with Sam Laporta, with the other role players that they have, like the Jameson Williams of the world, the Khalif Raymonds of the world, the Donovan Peoples-Jones, it doesn't really matter. Like, this offense is designed by Ben Johnson to move the ball down the field quickly. And Jared Goff last year proved, again, with, what was it, over 4,500 yards, over 4,400 yards, 30 touchdowns. He can make it happen. And there were plenty of weeks where he put up more than 23, right? And I think I'm going to do this on the fly. The intrigue for a guy like CJ Stroud this year is because, wow, he gave me, 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks with nearly 30 or over 30 fantasy points. He had 1 week with 41. He had a week with 30.9. Then he had a handful of 20, 21 point games. Jared Goff, let me see. That's Stroud stats. Jared Goff, there we are. 23.9, 19, 27.4, 22.4, 21.1, 31.1, 20.8. You're getting the same kind of upside from a pocket passer like CJ Stroud is with Jared Goff, except 6 rounds later, essentially. So don't fall for the trick of these pocket passers early on in these drafts. Yes, I know that CJ Stroud just got Stephon Diggs. Yes, I know that Patrick Mahomes is arguably the best quarterback in Kansas City. I get it. Practice some patience. Wait for these Jared Goffs. Wait for these Matt Staffords. Wait for these Kirk Cousins of the world. Jared Goff, though, needs to be that one guy that if you're going to punt on quarterback, Jared Goff has to be your guy that you target then.
His first 7 games are indoors as well. I know you brought up 14 of the 17. He gets the Rams week 1, certified banger. Week 2, he gets the Buccaneers, exposable secondary. Week 3, Arizona Cardinals, exposable secondary. Week 4, Seattle Seahawks, guaranteed banger for 3rd year in a row. Gets the Dallas Cowboys in a high-scoring game week 6. The Minnesota Vikings, exposable secondary. The Tennessee Titans in week 8, exposable secondary. Goes outdoor against Green Bay then. gets the Houston Texans, which would be a high scoring game indoors, the Jacksonville Jaguars, which I think that might be the one where I can't quite get a read on that game, but I just can't read the Jaguars that well in general this year. You get the Indianapolis Colts, who improving secondary, but points will be scored in that game if the Colts are moving the ball as I predict they will this year. Chicago Bears, exposable secondary. I guess you got Jalen Johnson there, so he could put some clamps down, but still an indoor game at Ford Field. Green Bay Packers, a divisional rival, at Ford Field. The Buffalo Bills, an exposable secondary at Ford Field. And then you get Soldier Field for the Bears. You get the 49ers at Levi's Stadium. High scoring game, good temperature. Away game might hamper the expectations there a little bit more. And if you do play in week 18, God forbid, you get the Minnesota Vikings, which is, again, say it with me, an exploitable secondary. I love Jared Goff this year. I really do. I love Jared Goff this year. I think he and the rest of these lines weapons are in for massive, massive years. And I'm getting my hands on him whenever I can. The only one who I'm really not drafting much of is Sam Laporta, just because his ADP was like at the 2-3 turn, which was super rich for me. He's fallen back into like the 30-32 range now. So I'm okay with him mid third round. But when you're paying like late second for him, that was where we drew the line. I couldn't invest in that. I'll wrap it up here, Ty, with my last player. I'll be honest, I had a few different guys I wanted to talk about with this pick, but I keep coming back to the fact that I just like Amari Cooper a lot this year. And he's going as the wide receiver 29, 45th overall. And you're probably like, yeah, it's about right, Lucas. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Deshaun Watson is going to be good this year. But what I can tell you is that Amari Cooper was actually pretty good when playing with Deshaun Watson last year. He had 90 plus receiving yards in 4 of his 5 games with Deshaun Watson. He was a top 20 wide receiver in 3 of those 5 games. And in 11 total games without either PJ Walker or Dorian Thompson-Robinson, or as Hayden Winks called it in his article, CFL quarterback level play, Amari Cooper was averaging 14.9 fantasy points per game, which would have been good for the wide receiver 10 last year. Again, all that per Hayden Winks. And you just look at the range of options of wide receivers going in the same area as Amari Cooper. You got George Pickens, who has yet to prove himself as a wide receiver 1. You've got Christian Kirk, who you and I also like this year, Ty, but they also just added Brian Thomas Jr. You also have Terry McLaurin there with a rookie quarterback. You've got Keenan Allen also with a rookie quarterback, but is now the wide receiver 2 with the Chicago Bears. Like, it's actually not that hard to convince yourself that Amari Cooper is the best wide receiver to take there out of that bunch, especially because we've also seen him finish as a top 10 wide receiver during his tenure with the Cleveland Browns. So at 29, like, I feel like we're drafting him at his floor there. I know he was outside of the top 30 in fantasy points per game last year, but I think that's more so of the bottom falling out, more so than it is like what Amari Cooper is actually going to be this year for the Cleveland Browns. So I love him at the wide receiver 29, very frequently a wide receiver 3 on my teams.
Yeah, Amari Cooper is a weird one because I think we only saw a handful of games with Deshaun Watson, but he's still by and far the clear one in that offense. You've got Nick Chubb coming back from his knee injury. You've got Jerome Ford then in the backfield, Deontay Foreman. It's not like the run game is a huge threat to Amari Cooper. So really, what is the hesitancy then with it when it comes to Amari Cooper? And that's probably the most puzzling thing. And that range or that tier of wide receivers, at least from like George Pickens down to, let's say, like even Jaden Reed, a wide receiver 34, it's kind of like, I kind of side with the Amari Cooper side of it, because it's like he's still a clear one, and it's not like this Cleveland offense is not going to be good. They may not be great, but it's definitely odd to me that he's going this late. And I know that he had just as a redraft dynasty manager of Amari Cooper, it was a very up and down season for Amari Cooper. I get it. But when it comes to best ball, again, you're not penalized for getting starts and sits wrong. If Amari Cooper does well, he's then in your lineup. So I do like Amari Cooper at this price tag this year as well. And the other thing is too, just wide receiver 29 at pick 45. That's nearly 30 wide receivers in the first 5 picks. That's crazy.
Only 15 are not wide receivers, which is nuts, which is, again, the importance of why you draft these guys early and often in these drafts. Because if you wait until the 5th round or the 6th round, to try and draft your wide receiver 3, let me just throw out some guys who would be there in the 6th round for you. That'd be pick 72, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I do my math right, that'd be the end of the 6th round. Yep. It'd be 60 to 72. You're looking at Xavier Worthy, Calvin Ridley, Rome Odunze, Chris Godwin, Jordan Addison, Keon Coleman, Ladd McConkey. Those are your options for your wide receiver 3 if you wait till the 6th round.
Yikes.
That's why you draft these guys early and often. You draft them early and often in Underdog. And to get Amari Cooper, again, people are going to see 45 and going to be like, what the heck? That's way too early. But when you see that 30 are nearly off the board in the first 45 picks within the first 50 picks, you recognize you got to get on them early and often, and to finish out, basically to finish out a tier, I would even say. Because you can throw Christian Kirk and Terry McLaurin in there if you want, but then it's Keenan Allen, Hollywood, Jaden Reed. Again, then the whole list of guys I named.
Mm-hmm.
To get him at the bottom of that tier of George Pickens, T. Higgins, Tank Dell, Zay Flowers, Cooper Kupp, I really don't hate that whatsoever. Because it's a lot of guys who are probably more floor players than ceiling players, and I think Amari Cooper might actually give you a little bit more ceiling than a Michael Pittman, than a Cooper Kupp, than a Zay Flowers. I think Tank Dell and T. Higgins and George Pickens probably have pretty high ceilings, but there's just a lot of risk baked into those 3 players then as well. So that's why I like Amari Cooper. I think there's safety there, but there's also this hidden upside that nobody really wants to care about.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is too, if you don't take a running back in the first 2 rounds, let's say, and you're at this round 3, round 4, spots, and you're like, well, should I go wide receiver first? Should I go running back first? I mean, look, round 3, you got the Travis Etienne's, you got the Josh Jacobs, and you've got the Isiah Pacheco's of the world.
Yep.
So, you don't necessarily need to force, the running back pick early. Or you don't need to force the wide receiver pick early. You can kind of play it as it comes to you, right? And you say, okay, I know that there is some upside then with Amari Cooper or any of the other guys in that tier that you mentioned. There's also some decent running backs to go in that range too. So you can really kind of play the board as it comes to you.
Which is so important. Again, we go back to that strategy piece. Yes, you should draft this many wide receivers by this point, but you got to let the board come to you as well in order to start strategizing, because you cannot perfectly plan a fantasy football draft from round 1 to round 18. Let alone the first 12 rounds, right? In a normal redraft league, it's impossible to plan from point A to point B.
I don't think you can even do it within the first 24 picks. You can't even you can't set your mind just to think that oh yeah, all these players are going to go. You really don't know.
Anything you want to add before we wrap out the episode here, Ty?
Look, I get to go get your guys. I get it.
Shout out Thad Brown.
Shout out
live streams quite a bit. Hashtag go get your guys, all caps. I mean, you do got to go get your guys, but
you got to get your guys, but we don't need to go overboard when it comes to getting your guys. Let the board fall. Don't get, trigger happy. Let the board fall. There's good values really everywhere, but they are just kind of hidden amongst everyone else.
And again, this is merely to give you a snapshot of what playing in best ball drafts is actually like. Again, ship chasing, legendary upside. Shoot, you can go follow Hayden Winks is one of my favorite follows on Twitter, man. He's got so much great content. I've learned so much just this offseason from all the research and time he has been putting in. He has been grinding. So if you don't follow him, Hayden Winks, Hayden Winks over on Twitter, he is absolutely worth a follow. And if you want to get into best ball, there's a lot of specific best ball content creators, and they would love your support as well. We are merely here to be advocates of the game, And because we love our friends over at Underdog as well, you can use code fellas over there. If you love us, support Underdog because they support us. Code fellas will unlock a special pick'em for you. I forgot to mention that at the top, and a deposit bonus of up to $250 as well, as Ty is holding the Underdog Yeti in his frame.
Oh,
I don't
this?
think I have anything.
Oh, yeah.
Do I have anything Underdog? I don't. Gosh, how did I not think to wear an Underdog shirt for this episode too? I should have gone with the Hawaiian shirt, man. How
You
did I
should
not
have.
think of that?
Come on.
I really should. And the bucket hat. Oh no.
It's literally right there. Like, I'm literally looking at it.
Missed opportunities all left and right today. What are we doing, man?
We could have been swagged out, but we nah.
And we would have been called sellouts. Then again, I wear the Hawaiian shirt on every live stream that I do for Underdog, though.
You know what? If being cool is being called a sellout for Underdog Fantasy, then I want to be cool.
Then I want to be cool. I 100% agree. Support them because they support us. Again, code fellas over there if you want to try out some of their contests. We'll be back next week. We've got some ranking debates happening next week. We're going to start getting into some risk reward, bounce back players. Are they trending or ending? Got a lot of fun content coming up for you all. So make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel or the audio podcast, whichever one you are listening to, and make sure to turn on those notifications as well so you know when all of our newest episodes and videos are up. Shorts coming 3, 4, 5 times a week. 2 YouTube videos, 2 podcasts every single week. We are keeping the content churning for you this offseason. So again, stay ready so you don't got to get ready, as Conor McGregor and Will Smith would say. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy. Give us a follow on the socials as well. I'm at Lucas wencl, Tyler_plath for Tyler on X. And the main page is FF Fellas on X, BFF Fellas on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. We will see you all next time. Stay safe, y'all. Deuces.